Hi there, all my little artists. Today we're going to be creating some awesome tiki designs. Tikis are really cool. They come from the Polynesian culture, from Polynesia, and they're kind of human-like figures, traditionally carved into wood. They're sometimes really big, and they just kind of have that like tropical island vibe that you associate with lots of island cultures. Some things that make the tiki style face more unique is they usually have really big features, great big eyes, big nose, big mouth, big teeth. They're symmetrical, which means if you fold them in half, one side matches the other. It's just a mirrored, flipped over image. And today I'm going to show you a few different material options you can use to make these, and you can choose to make them either more monochromatic with just shades of brown, you can add white if you want, or you can incorporate some colors. So let's get started.
Okay, so the materials you are definitely going to need is some kind of like paper bag or brown construction paper. If you have brown construction paper, awesome. But this works just fine with some kind of paper bag. You just need to be able to draw on it and fold it. You will need something to draw with. I suggest a pencil if you have it, scissors, and something waxy or oily to do your lines. So crayons work just fine, either black or brown. You really only need one. If you have oil pastels, if you have a black oil pastel or brown oil pastel on hand, those work great, but you can totally do this with just crayons. I'm gonna do this with just crayons. Some other items you might need are, if you want to add color, either more colors of oil pastels or some kind of paint. I have my homemade watercolors right here, just made out of recycled markers. If you want to go with an all brown look, I have my homemade brown coffee paint, or you can just use any kind of brown paint. White crayons work just fine. White oil pastels, I actually mixed up like some toothpaste the other day to make that, which works just fine. So obviously you need some kind of water and paintbrush. And the only other thing you might need is, if you were using crayon, I found that an iron or something to heat up your paper helps transfer. If you don't have an iron, I even tried it by clamping the paper shut with a hair straightener. But remember, if you're using anything that heats up, kids, you need to use that with your parents' help, okay? If you're a teenager and you have a hair straightener and you use it all the time, and it's okay to use it on an art project, fine. But if you don't usually use an iron at home, please have your parents help you with this. So we're gonna get started. First thing you need to do is you just need to get a square piece or rectangle piece from your brown bag. So I'm gonna carefully take the handles off, and I'm just gonna use the front part of this. I'm gonna make this bigger than these were so you guys can see it better and because it'll look awesome. But if you only have a little brown bag, like a brown lunch bag, these look great smaller too. This is only about 2 hands tall, and so here's my brown piece. It's not quite a perfect rectangle or square, but you can see we're gonna cut it a little bit more anyway, so that's not that big of a deal if it's not quite perfect, as long as it's, as big as you want it, close to a rectangle or square, and you can fold it in half. So we're not actually gonna use this side, we're gonna use the empty side. And the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a fold right down the middle. So I want it to have a vertical fold, so I'm gonna fold it up like a hot dog. Make your fold as flat as possible. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I've already got my iron hot and ready to go, so I'm really gonna make my fold nice and flat. If you're doing this with your parent, or you're a big kid and already use an iron and wanna go ahead and fold it flat, go for it, but you don't really need to do that. I just want to cheat a little bit. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna draw half of your face. So you're just drawing one eye, half of a nose, half of a mouth, half of your shape in your design. Don't draw all of it. I'll show you how to flip it. Okay. The other thing that's really important is you want the center to be the fold, so that when you open it, this side's connected to this side. If I draw half of a mouth over here, when I open this up, the other half's gonna be on this side. So just go ahead and draw that with a pencil. Alright, so I'm pretty much done with my drawing. Some important stuff to pay attention to is that I do have areas that go all the way to the edge. I have a lot of areas that don't. The other thing you need to think about is what you're going to cut off. So as I cut this, I'm going to follow this shape, cut out to here. But then through here, I don't want to cut out this whole big piece. So sometimes you might just have an area where you connect to show the outline. Because eventually when I cut, this is a part that I'm going to cut off following this line down and around here. So the other really important thing to note is that you don't really have a lot of big areas of empty space. You might have a couple open areas, you know, maybe on the cheek or something like that, but the top and bottom are usually filled up with some kind of pattern, and your nose, mouth, and eye should really take up a lot too. You might also consider adding details like eyebrows, headdresses. The pattern that go along the top and bottom can match, or they can be unrelated. Next, you're going to trace this, and you can decide to either trace this with a black oil pastel or crayon or a brown oil pastel or crayon. It depends on the look you're going for, and also if you're going to add color, if you're going to keep it more monochromatic. So I am just going to use crayon, and you can also even test your crayons in an area that you know you're going to cut off to decide which one will work best or which one you want to go with. I'm going to go ahead and go with black so that you guys can see it. Okay, so I'm all done tracing this side. Again, I don't have anything on this side yet, but we're about to get this to flip to here in just a minute. You can see I left one line not traced. That's because I did this with black crayon. And I want to show you the difference between transferring it with crayon and oil pastel. So if I were to do this with oil pastel, first of all, you can see that with one line, it makes a nice, really dark black. That's because oil pastel is just squishier and softer. Okay, so if you do oil pastel, you probably don't even need the iron to transfer that from one side to the other. But if you do crayon, you probably will need something to heat it up a little bit to transfer it over. Again, it just depends on what you have. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna open this up, and you're gonna turn that fold inside out, kind of like turning a sock inside out. So we're gonna bend it backwards along that fold. Now, if you just did all this with oil pastel, what you can do is you can close it and hold it still, and take your scissors and actually use the flattest part and rub. And what happens is that kind of pushes that oil pastel onto the other side. So you can see that oil pastel line starting to really show up. And when you do it for a while in a couple of different directions, you eventually start to see it. Now you guys can kind of see the black crayon starting to show up too. If you keep on doing this over and over and over again for a really, really, really long time, pushing really hard, but also making sure to hold your paper still so it's not sliding, otherwise your lines start to get blurry. Eventually that crayon will show up enough that you can trace it. And if you want to do it this way, that's fine. Whether you did that with oil pastel or crayon, you would need to go back over those lines again to make it as dark as this side. But if you have an iron and somebody willing to help you, one thing you can do is take that iron, and I have it on a pretty high temperature with no or really low steam. And sometimes just doing that will transfer your lines quite a bit. Or, don't iron your project to the table. Or you can do a combination of both ironing and while an area is really hot, rubbing with those scissors until you really start to see those lines show up. Now, this isn't dark as this, so you're gonna have to keep on doing this until you can see them all really good. But once you can see them all really good, exactly where they're supposed to be, your next step is to take your black crayon and go back over those lines. Now that you have a map of where they go, and you want these to be just as dark and thick as they are on this side. You don't want one side to look lighter than the other. You really want this to have that symmetry. Alright, so once you're done getting your design traced from one side to the other using iron and or scissors, rubbing it, and then retracing, now we're ready to cut it out. You want to have black all the way around all your edges. That's going to contain your color later. And you don't want to cut that black off. So when you cut, start on one side and just cut on the very outside edge of your black. Hopefully you made your lines nice and thick. And if you didn't, I would go back and thicken up any skinny lines, especially around your edge, before you cut. You might notice that this has some little specks. Those are just those flakes from your crayon, and when you iron them, they kind of get stuck on your paper. If you really don't like those, make sure to get this dusted off really good before you iron, but to be honest, once I've added color, I don't really notice them. I think it kind of just makes it look more like real wood, which is what these will be made out of. And that brings us to our last step, which is adding color. My suggestion is don't color in more than half of your stuff. Leave at least half of it, just that brown of your cardboard. So I tried to color in like every other thing. For this one, all I used to color in was just my brown coffee paint. So that's just really dark coffee that I've actually brewed a couple times, and it makes a really nice brown. And then to create the white on this, because many of us might not have white paint at home, all I used was some white toothpaste and watered it down, and I just did it in a couple layers. And after a couple layers, that white chunky toothpaste got really, really nice and white. And it dried out and made a really good white for the teeth. So when you put it on, it looks a little more streaky, but you just gotta let it dry, and as it dries, it makes this nice white. So having one that's just a couple shades of brown and white is totally okay. I think it looks a little more authentic. But if you want, you can do them with some color. I wouldn't do a whole bunch of different colors. I think that looks a little messy and silly and kind of crazy. And remember, these were outside, so they were made with a lot of natural materials. They got pretty weathered. I would make it with maybe 2 or 3 colors that you repeat in more than one spot. So for this one, I just used orange, green, and some blue. And this one, I just used my homemade watercolors. One student showed me that you can actually take that marker and draw with it to paint. I'm old school though, and I like to use paintbrush. So whatever medium you're using to color, you can even use crayon if you want. In fact, a lot of these have these big open empty eyes, so I might just use my crayon on both sides to color in the eyes dark black.
All right, that's it. I hope you guys all had fun making these awesome, fun, funky tiki designs. I think that they come out really, really, really cool. It doesn't matter if you make it big or if you make it small, if you give it color, or if you keep it really monochromatic with just your browns. No matter what, they look really neat, and they're a lot of fun to make. And I hope that you guys come back and join me and make some more art soon. Bye guys, thanks for watching.